Some prices are meant to insult. $3 was the going rate for a workhorse in those days. Maybe a barrel of grain if the harvest had been good. But on that wooden platform in the middle of the desert, $3 was the price tag hanging around a woman's neck. Cataryi stood with her chin raised, wore paint still fresh on her cheeks while a crowd of men on horseback circled like vultures. When the bidding began, she looked straight into the eyes of every man present and said 5 words that made the desert go silent. What those men didn't know was that she'd already tried to end 2 lives before reaching that platform, and what the weathered rancher, stepping forward with crumpled bills, didn't know was that paying those $3 would start something neither of them could stop. The sun had climbed past its highest point when they dragged her into the open plain. No shade for miles, just cracked earth and distant mountains that shimmered in the heat. Lucas Brennan had been standing at the edge of the crowd for the better part of an hour, watching the whole ugly business unfold. He'd told himself he was just passing through, told himself it wasn't his concern. But something about the way she walked, even with her wrists bound, made him stay. Silas Crane, the man running the auction, was sweating through his shirt. He'd done this before plenty of times, but never with someone who looked at him the way this woman did, like she was memorizing his face for later. He cleared his throat and gestured toward the platform. 2 men shoved her forward, and she climbed the wooden steps without stumbling, without looking back. She stood there, elevated above them all, and Lucas could see the painted symbols across her face. The kind warriors wore. Her braids hung past her shoulders, adorned with feathers and beads that caught the light. The fringe garment she wore moved slightly in the hot wind. She didn't try to cover herself, didn't lower her eyes. Every line of her body said the same thing. You can chain me, but you cannot break me. Crane pulled out a piece of paper, squinting at it. A patchy woman, age unknown, captured 3 weeks back near the Canyon Territories. Strong, healthy, he paused, and Lucas saw him swallow hard. History of resistance. Someone in the crowd laughed. That's a nice way of putting it. Bidding starts at $5, Crane announced, his voice cracking slightly. Silence, the kind that feels heavy. Crane's face reamed. $4. Then more silence. Horses shifted their weight. Somewhere a hawk called out. $3, Crane said. And now there was desperation in his voice. $3 for that's when she spoke. Her voice carried across the desert like a blade. I'd rather die. The words hung in the air. Several men looked at each other. One turned his horse around and rode off without a word. Crane tried to recover. $3. Do I hear 3? Lucas felt. His hand moved to his pocket before his brain caught up. He pulled out the bills, old and soft from use, and stepped forward. The crowd parted slightly as he approached the platform. He didn't look at the other man, didn't acknowledge Crane. His eyes went straight to her. She stared down at him, and for a moment, Lucas saw something flicker across her face. Not hope. Something harder than that. Recognition. Maybe. Of what? He couldn't say. He held up the money. $3. Crane snatched the bills quickly as if afraid Lucas might change his mind. Sold. Take her and go. But Lucas didn't move to take her anywhere. He stood there looking up at the woman on the platform and realized he had absolutely no idea what happened next. Neither did she. And that uncertainty stretched between them like a rope pulled tight, ready to snap. What neither of them knew was that Crane had left out one crucial detail about why the bidding had dropped so low. By sunset, that detail would matter more than the $3 ever could. The chains came off first. Lucas reached for the iron cuffs around her wrists, and Cataryi jerked back so violently she nearly fell. Off the platform, the crowd had dispersed quickly after the sale, eager to distance themselves from the transaction, but a few stragglers remained on horseback at the edge of the plain. Watching, Lucas kept his hands visible, palms up. I'm taking these off. She said nothing. Her amber eyes tracked his every movement like a wolf watching a hunter approach its den. When he stepped closer, she spat at his feet. The gesture was deliberate, measured, not panic, pure contempt. He unlocked. The cuffs anyway. They fell to the wooden platform with a dull clang. And for the first time since she'd been brought here, her wrists were free. Raw skin showed where the metal had bitten into her flesh for weeks. She didn't rub. The marks didn't acknowledge the pain. Instead, she stepped down from the platform. Her movements fluid despite the days of captivity. Lucas watched her survey the landscape. He could see her calculating distances, mapping escape routes. The nearest cover was at least 2 miles north. The mountains to the east would take a full day on foot. South was nothing but open desert. West led back to the settlements. Got a horse tied up over there, Lucas said, gesturing toward a cluster of scrub brush where his mare waited. Food, the saddlebag, water. Catar's gaze snapped to him, and he saw something in her expression that made him take an involuntary step back. Not fear, not even anger, something colder than both. You think $3 buys my gratitude? Her voice was rough from disuse, but clear. Perfect English with an accent that told him she'd been around settlers before. That made this worse somehow. She knew exactly what was happening here. Lucas shook his head. I don't want your gratitude. Then what do you want? It was a fair question. He didn't have a good answer. The truth was complicated, buried under years of things he'd rather not examine too closely. So he said the simplest version, to make sure you don't die out here. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not like you don't save people like me. You collect us, put us in houses that feel like cages and call it kindness. Before he could respond, she moved fast. She grabbed a rock from the ground the size of her fist and hurled it at the remaining spectators. It struck one man's horse in the flank. The animal reared, throwing its rider into the dust. The other men shouted, reaching for their rifles. Lucas stepped between them and Cataryi, his hands raised. Go on, get out of here. That savage just attacked. I said go. Something in his voice made them hesitate. Maybe it was the fact that he was known in these parts. Maybe it was the look in his eyes that said he wasn't in the mood for discussion. Either way, they turned their horses and rode off, kicking up dust as they went. When Lucas turned back around, was already running. She didn't head for the mountains or the settlements. She ran straight into the open desert toward nothing but heat and emptiness. Her bare feet kicked up sand as she sprinted, and Lucas stood there watching her go, knowing she wouldn't make it 3 miles before the sun finished what the chains had started. He also knew that if he chased her now, she'd fight him with everything she had left. And maybe that's what she wanted. Maybe dying free in the desert was better than whatever she thought he was offering. But there was something she didn't know yet. Something Crane had whispered to him while counting the money. That one already put a knife through 2 men who tried to claim her. One of them bled out in a wagon. The other lost an eye. Lucas watched her figure grow smaller against the horizon. She wasn't running from him. She was running toward the only choice she thought she had left. And if he let her go, she'd be dead before the sun touched the western hills. What happened next would determine whether his $3 had bought her life or just delayed her death. Lucas gave her 10 minutes, long enough to feel the weight of her decision, not long enough to die from it. Then he mounted his mare and rode after her, keeping his distance at first. She had to have heard the hoof-beats, but she didn't look back, just kept running, her silhouette wavering in the heat. By the time he caught up, she'd slowed to a walk. Her breathing came hard and ragged. The desert had already started taking its toll. He rode past her, then circled back, cutting off her path. She stopped, chest heaving, hands on her knees. When she straightened, her eyes held murder. Get out of my way. Lucas stayed in the saddle, one hand resting on the horn. There's nothing out here for 20M. No water, no shade. I know this land, not this part. This is Badlands. Even the Snakes avoided. She took a step forward, and he saw her hand move to her waist where a knife should have been where it probably was before Crane took it. Her fingers curled into a fist when they found nothing. I'll take my chances with the desert over you. Why? The question came out sharper than he intended. What did I do besides take those chains off? You paid for me. Each word was like a stone thrown. That makes me your property in the eyes of every man who saw it happen. $3 or 300. It doesn't matter. I'm still owned. Lucas swung down from his horse, and she immediately backed up 3 paces. He stopped where he was, making no move to approach. I'm not taking you anywhere. I'm not putting you in a house or a wagon. I'm giving you a choice. Men like you don't give choices. You give orders and call them options. You're right about some of us. He pulled the water canteen from his saddle and set it on the ground between them. I've done things I can't undo. Worn a uniform I'm not proud of. Followed orders that still wake me up at night. He paused, watching her watch him. But right now I'm just trying to keep you alive long enough to get far from here. She stared at the canteen. He could see the war happening inside her. Thirst fighting pride. Why should I believe you? Because if I wanted to drag you somewhere, I'd have done it already. You're exhausted. I'm on a horse. It wouldn't be a fair fight. He took 2 steps back, putting more distance between them. But I'm not here for a fight. Cataryi looked at him for a long moment, and he could feel her measuring him. Not his words, his stance, the way he held himself. People who survived. What she had learned to read bodies, not voices. Finally, she moved fast and low. She grabbed the canteen and retreated immediately, putting 10 feet between them before she opened it. She drank deeply, water spilling down her chin. When she finished, she threw the canteen back at him. He caught it. What's your name? He asked. None of your concern. Fair enough. I am Lucas Brennan. Used to run cattle north of here. Now I don't run much of anything. He paused. There's a trading post about 15 miles west run by a woman named Sarah Blackwood. She takes people in. No questions. If you let me, I'll get you there. Then you never have to see me again. And if I don't let you, then I'll follow you at a distance until you either reach somewhere safe or until you can't walk anymore. He met her eyes. Because I've already got enough ghosts. I don't need another one. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust, but maybe recognition that he was telling some version of the truth. She turned her face toward the west where the sun was beginning its descent and seemed to calculate something. 15 miglia, give or take. She was quiet for a long time. Then, without looking at him, she said, My name is Cataryi, and if you try to touch me, I'll take your eyes before you take a second breath. Lucas nodded slowly. Understood. Neither of them moved. The desert stretched out around them, indifferent to their standoff. Finally, Sai started walking west. Not toward him, not away, just west. After a moment, Lucas led his horse and followed, keeping 20 feet between them. They walked in silence as the sun burned overhead. But both of them knew this wasn't trust. This was survival. And survival had its own rules. Rules that would be tested as soon as they made camp for the night. Sunset came fast in the desert. One moment the sky was blue. The next it bled orange and red across the horizon. Lucas found a spot between 2 large rocks that would offer some protection from the wind. Cataryi stopped 20 feet away and sat down on the bare ground, her back against a boulder. He unpacked his saddlebag without a word. Dried meat, hard bread, another canteen of water. He laid half of it on a flat stone and pushed it toward her with his boot. She watched him do this, her face unreadable in the fading light. I'm not hungry. You haven't eaten in days, probably. I said, I'm not hungry. Lucas picked up his portion and ate slowly, keeping his eyes on the darkening desert rather than on her. After a few minutes, he heard her move. When he glanced over, the food was gone from the stone, and she was chewing with her face turned away from him. The temperature dropped fast once the sun disappeared. Lucas built a small fire. just enough for warmth. Cater stayed in her spot, arms wrapped around her knees. The firelight caught the paint on her face, making the red marks look fresh like blood. That paint, Lucas said. Carefully. We're paint, right? She didn't answer at first, then it's a promise. To who? To myself. She looked at him across the fire. Every mark means something. This one, she touched the stripe across her forehead, is for my brother. This one, her fingers moved her cheek, is for the children I protected. And this one, she traced the symbol near her jaw, is for the man I will become if I survive this. Lucas frowned. You mean the woman? I said what I meant. He let that sit between them. After a while, he spoke again. You said you were captured 3 weeks ago. What happened? Katie stared into the fire for a long time. He thought she wouldn't answer. Then, soldiers came to our camp. We knew they were coming. We could have run, scattered into the mountains, but there were children, 14 of them, too young to survive a chase through the high country. So you stayed. So I made a deal. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I told them I would surrender if they let the others go. The commander agreed. He was a liar. But by the time I realized it, the children were already hidden in the caves. The adults led the soldiers in the wrong direction. By the time they figured it out, it was too late to track them. Lucas felt something twist in his chest. You traded yourself. I bought time. She looked at him then, and her eyes were hard. They beat me for it. Kept me chained in a wagon for 2 weeks. When the first man tried to touch me, I took his knife and buried it in his leg. He lived, but barely. The second man was smarter. He waited until I was asleep. I woke up with his hands on me, and my hands found his face. Thumbs work well for eyes, I learned. The casual way she said it made Lucas's stomach turn. Not because of the violence, because of how necessary it had been. That's why Crane sold you for $3. That's why no one wanted me at all. She smiled, but it was bitter, too dangerous, too much trouble. Better to let me die in the desert than risk another injury. Lucas poked at the fire with a stick. I had a daughter once. Cataryi went very still. 16 years old. Look a bit like you, actually. Same defiant eyes. Same way of standing like the ground beneath her belonged to her. Alone. He paused, the words catching in his throat. There was a raid on a settlement. I was part of the response. Team. Verodahart. Got there too late. Buildings were burning. People were scattered in the chaos. Someone started shooting. I don't know who fired first. Maybe it doesn't matter. Your daughter died in the raid. No. The word came out rough. She died because I was wearing a uniform. Because when we arrived, we didn't ask questions. We just assumed every person we saw running was an enemy. My daughter had gone to that settlement to trade. She was running toward us, trying to get to safety, and one of my men shot her. The silence that followed was absolute. He didn't know. Lucas continued. In his defense, he didn't know, but I was the one who trained him. I was the one who led that unit. I was the one who created a situation where fear mattered more than recognition. When she finally spoke, so, you think buying me makes up for it? No. Lucas met her eyes across the fire. Nothing. Makes up for it, but maybe keeping you alive keeps me from being the same man who let her die. She stood abruptly, and for a moment, he thought she might leave. Instead, she walked closer to the fire, just outside its warmest circle. Your guilt is not my responsibility to carry. I know, and your daughter's death doesn't give you ownership of my survival. I know that too. They stood there, the fire between them, and something unspoken passed in the silence. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, but recognition that they were both carrying weight that had nothing to do with each other and everything to do with who they'd become. What neither of them saw was the flicker of movement in the rocks behind them. Someone had been watching since they'd stopped, and that someone had recognized Lucas Brennan. Now, the real danger of the night was just beginning to take shape. The sound came just after midnight, a soft scrape of boot on stone. Lucas was awake instantly, his hand moving to the rifle beside him. Cater was already on her feet, her body tense and ready. They looked at each other across the dying embers, and in that moment, they were on the same side. Three men emerged from the darkness, rifles pointed. Lucas recognized one of them immediately. Cyrus Fletcher, a man he'd served with years ago, a man who'd been there the day his daughter died. Brennan. Cyrus's voice was cold. Fancy seeing you out here. Lucas stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. Cyrus, it's been a while. Not long enough. Cyrus gestured with his rifle toward Cataryi. Heard you bought yourself some company at Crane's auction. Paying for women now. That's low even for you. I'm not his woman, Cataryi said, her voice cutting through the night like a blade. I belong to no one. One of the other men laughed. That's not what the bill of sale says. Lucas felt rage building his chest, but he kept his voice level. What do you want, Cyrus? Justice. Cyrus stepped closer to the fire, and the light revealed the hatred etched into his face. You cost me everything, Brennan. After what happened with your daughter, after you quit the unit, they blamed me. Said I fired without orders. Stripped my rank, dishonorably discharged. My wife left. My children won't speak to me. And you? You just walked away. I didn't walk away. I crawled. You got to crawl because you were the commander. I got buried. Cyrus's finger moved to the trigger. So now I'm going to take from you what was taken from me. Everything. Cataryi moved so fast that no one had time to react. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it at the closest man, hitting him across the face. He screamed, dropping his rifle. She rolled, grabbed the weapon, and came up aiming at Cyrus, but she didn't fire. Lucas saw her hesitate, saw the calculations running behind her eyes. Three men, two of them still armed. If she shot Cyrus, the others would kill her and Lucas both. If she didn't shoot, Cyrus might do it first. Put the rifle down, girl, Cyrus said softly. This doesn't concern you. Everything concerns me when I'm the one holding the weapon. Lucas took a step forward. Cyrus, she's not part of this. Let her go. Whatever you need to do it to me. Noble. Cyrus spat on the ground. But see, I think she is part of this. I think you care about keeping her alive, which means taking her from you hurts just right. That's when Lucas understood. Cyrus didn't want to kill him. He wanted to make him watch someone else die. Wanted to recreate the helplessness Lucas had felt watching his daughter fall. Cataryi must have understood too, because her stance shifted. She wasn't aiming at Cyrus anymore. She was aiming at her own temple. Everyone froze. You want to take her from him? Cataryi's voice was eerily calm. Go ahead, but you'll get a corpse, not a captive, and his pain will be nothing compared to the fact that you failed to control me even in death. Cyrus's face twisted. You're bluffing. Am I? She pressed the barrel harder against her skin. I already told him I'd rather die than be owned. This just moves up the timeline. Lucas felt his heart hammering. Don't stay out of this, Lucas. She kept her eyes on Cyrus. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to lower your weapons. You're going to walk back into the desert, and you're going to let us leave, because if you don't, you get nothing. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just the memory of a woman who chose death over giving you power. The standoff stretched. Seconds felt like hours. Lucas could see Cyrus weighing his options, could see the moment he realized she meant every word. Finally, Cyrus lowered his rifle. You're insane. No, Cataryi's smile was sharp. I'm free, and that terrifies you. Cyrus gestured to his men, and they backed away slowly into the darkness. But before he disappeared completely, he looked at Lucas one more time. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Lucas said quietly. It's been over since the day she died. You just didn't want to admit it. They waited in silence until the sound of retreating footsteps faded completely. Only then did Cataryi lower the rifle. Her hands were shaking, but her face showed nothing. Lucas looked at her. Would you have done it She met his eyes. Yes. Why? Because some things are worse than dying. She handed him the rifle, and being used as a weapon against someone else is one of them. They didn't sleep the rest of the night. They sat on opposite sides of a dead fire, and something had changed between them. Not trust, not quite, but understanding. They were both survivors of other people's wars, and maybe that was enough. What they didn't know was that by morning, they'd have to make a choice that would define everything that came next. Dawn came with bruised, purple light, bleeding into gray. Cataryi sat, watching the horizon, and Lucas could see the war happening inside her. She'd been silent for an hour, her fingers tracing patterns in the dust. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. The trading post. This woman you mentioned, Sarah Blackwood. What about her? Would she help children? Lucas felt something shift in his chest. How many children are we talking about? 14, ages 5 to 12. They're hiding in caves 3 days north of here. I told them to wait 2 weeks. After that, if I didn't return, they were supposed to scatter and try to reach the northern territories on their own. She turned to face him, and her eyes were desperate in a way he hadn't seen before. It's been 3 weeks and 4 days. They might have already left. Or there, still waiting, still hoping I'm coming back. Her voice cracked slightly. They have some dried food I hid there months ago. Water from spring, but winter's coming. If we're still there when the first snow hits those mountains, they won't survive. Lucas stood brushing dust from his pants. How far did you say? 3 days on foot, maybe 2 on horseback if you know the trails. And you know the trails? It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Better than I know my own face. Lucas walked to his horse and started checking the saddlebags, redistributing the weight. Cataryi watched him, confusion crossing her features. What are you doing? Getting ready to ride north. I didn't ask for your help. I know, he tightened a strap, but those kids did the day you traded yourself for them. And if you're going back, you're not doing it alone and on foot. Cataryi stood slowly, her body tense. Why would you do this? You don't owe me anything. You barely know me. Lucas paused, his hand still on the saddle. My daughter used to volunteer at the schoolhouse, taught the younger kids how to read. After she died, I found her journal. Last entry said she was planning to start a lending library for children who couldn't afford books. She'd already collected 30 volumes, hidden them in our barn. He looked at Cataryi. She never got to give those books away, never got to see those kids, learn to read. But maybe I can make sure 14 other children get a chance she didn't. That's not the same thing. No, but it's something. He held out his hand. Help me up. You're riding with me. We'll move faster that way. Terry stared at his outstretched hand like it was a snake. Every instinct she had probably screamed not to trust it. But slowly, reluctantly, she reached out and gripped his forearm. He pulled her up behind him onto the horse. She sat rigid, keeping as much distance as possible while still maintaining balance. If you try anything, you'll take my eyes. Remember. He nudged the horse into motion. Which direction? North, toward the red rock formations. They rode in silence for the first hour. The sun climbed higher, turning the desert into a furnace. Carrie eventually had a grip, his shoulders to keep from sliding off when they crossed rougher terrain. Each time she touched him, he could feel her, tense, ready to fight if needed. Around midday, she spoke again. The children, most of them aren't related to me by blood. Their parents died in raids, sickness, accidents. Our tribe took them, and because that's what you do. You don't leave children to die just because they're not yours. Sounds like a good tribe. Was a good tribe. Her voice was bitter. Now we're scattered, broken. The soldiers made sure of that. Lucas felt the familiar weight of guilt. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't feed 14 hungry children. Sorry doesn't keep them warm when winter comes. Sorry is just a word people use when they want to feel better about things they can't fix. She was right, and he knew it. So, he didn't say sorry. Again, Instead, he asked, "What do they need besides safety?" "Everything. Food, warm clothes, blankets, medicine, a place to stay until spring when it's safe to move them further north." She paused. "Money for bribes if we encounter soldiers, papers if we can forge them, luck if the spirits are listening. How about some money saved? Not much, but enough for supplies." "Why?" Her grip on his shoulders tightened. "Why would you spend your money on this?" "Because you were willing to aim a rifle at your own head rather than let someone use you as a weapon. That kind of courage deserves better than dying in a desert or watching children freeze in caves." He glanced back at her, "And because my daughter would have done exactly what you did. She'd have traded herself without hesitation." Cater was quiet for a long moment, then so softly he almost missed it. "Your daughter sounds like she was strong. She was got it from her mother. Where's her mother now?" "Dead. Fever took her when our daughter was 10. I raised her alone after that. Did a terrible job of it according to most people. Let her run wild. Taught her to shoot and ride instead of sew and cook. Sounds like you did exactly right." They rode on as the sun tracked across the sky. And for the first time since he'd paid those $3, Lucas felt like maybe he was moving in the right direction. What he didn't know was that Cyrus Fletcher hadn't left the territory, and he'd figured out exactly where they were headed. The caves appeared on the second evening, hidden in a cliff face that looked like solid rock until you knew where to look. Carrie slid off the horse before Lucas had fully stopped, her feet hitting the ground running. She scrambled up a narrow path, moving with the sure-footedness of someone who'd climbed it 100 times. "Nieli," she called out. "Takakota, it's me." Silence answered her. Lucas felt dread settling in his gut as he followed her up the path, leading his horse carefully over the loose stones. Maybe the children had left. Maybe they'd been found. Maybe a small face appeared at the cave entrance. Then another. Then suddenly, there were children everywhere, pouring out of the darkness, crying's name. They swarmed her, grabbing at her clothes, her hands, her arms. She knelt and pulled them close, and Lucas saw her face transform. The hardness melted away, replaced by something fierce and protective and utterly vulnerable. "You came back," a girl of about 10 whispered. "We thought you were dead. I told you I'd come back." Katie pulled back to look at them, counting heads quickly. "Where's Nieli and Takakota?" An older boy, maybe 12, stepped forward. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp beneath skin pulled too tight. "Nieli's inside. She's been sick for 4 days. Fever. Takakota's with her, trying to keep her cool with water from the spring." Cataryi's face went pale. She stood and moved toward the cave entrance. Lucas followed, ducking his head to enter. The darkness inside was broken by a small fire near the back. A teenage girl sat beside a makeshift bed of grass and blankets where a small child lay motionless. Cataryi rushed to them, dropping to her knees. She touched the child's forehead and jerked her hand back. "She's burning up. I gave her water, like you taught us," the teenage girl Takakota said. Her eyes were red from crying. "I did everything you said, but she just got worse." Lucas knelt beside them, looking at the sick child, 6 years old, maybe 7. Her breathing was shallow and fast. He'd seen this before. Infection probably. Without medicine, it would run its course one way or another. "How about some willow bark in my saddle?" "Bag," he said, "for pain and fever. It might help." Looked at him sharply as if she'd forgotten he was there. Then she nodded. "Get it?" He did, moving quickly, back down the path to his horse. When he returned, Cataryi had already organized the other children. One was boiling water over the fire. Another was tearing cloth into strips. Takakota was mixing something in a bowl, some kind of paste, made from crushed plants. Lucas handed over the willow bark, and Cataryi mixed it with hot water, letting it steep. When it cooled enough, she lifted the child's head gently and coaxed small sips past her lips. How long have they been living? Like this? Lucas asked quietly. 3 months in these caves, Takakota answered. Before that, we moved every few days. Carrie found this place and said it was safe to stay. Lucas looked around the cave. Supplies were nearly gone. Empty pouches that once held dried meat. A single blanket shared among 14 children. The spring water mentioned was probably the only reason they were still alive. We need to move them, Lucas said. Tonight, that trading post I mentioned, Sarah Blackwood's place. It's still a day's ride from here, but it's safe. She'll take them in. New York can't travel like this, Katie said. Then I'll carry her. Lucas met her eyes. But we can't stay here. If I figured out where you were headed, others can too. Cyrus knows. I care about finishing what we started. He'll come looking. Cater's jaw tightened. Then let him come. I'll finish what I started with the last 2 men who try to take these children. There are 14 lives depending on you. Making the smart choice, not the brave one. She flinched as if he'd struck her. For a moment, Lucas thought she might hit him, but then she looked at the children, really looked at them, saw their hollow cheeks and tired eyes, saw how they huddled close together for warmth, even though it wasn't that cold yet, saw what her pride would cost them if she chose to fight instead of flee. Fine. The word came out like she was spitting glass. We move at first light. Give them one more night to rest. First light, Lucas agreed. I'll keep watch tonight. You rest with them. She didn't argue. Maybe she was too tired. Maybe she'd finally accepted that accepting help wasn't the same as accepting ownership. Either way, she settled near the fire with the children curled around her like puppies seeking warmth. Lucas sat at the cave entrance, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness. Behind him, he could hear Cater's voice soft and low, telling the children an old tale. Something about a clever coyote who outsmarted bigger animals by using the wind to carry warnings across the canyon. He smiled despite himself. She was a fighter, yes, but she was also this. Someone who told stories to scared children in dark caves. Someone worth those $3 and everything that had come after. The night stretched on, and Lucas didn't sleep because somewhere out there, he knew Cyrus was coming. And when morning came, they'd need to be ready for whatever followed them out of these mountains. They came at dawn just as Lucas knew they would. Cyrus and his 2 men appeared on the ridge above the caves, rifles ready. But Lucas had prepared. He'd moved the children down the mountain before first light, sent them ahead with Takakota leading the way to Sarah's trading post. Only he and Carrie remained. Cyrus smiled when he saw them. Just the 2 of you. Where are the children gone? Lucas said, You're too late. I don't believe you. Cyrus gestured to his men. Search the caves. While they climbed toward the entrance, Cataryi stepped forward. She'd washed the war paint from her face during the night, but somehow she looked more dangerous without it. You came all this way for revenge on a man who's already been punished by his own guilt. That makes you pathetic. Cyrus's face darkened. Shut your mouth, girl. My name is Cataryi, and I'm not a girl. I'm the woman who chose death over submission. I'm the woman who saved 14 children, while you waste your life chasing ghosts. She moved closer, unafraid. You want to know the difference between you and Lucas? He's trying to build something from his ruins. You're just kicking at ashes, hoping to start a fire that died years ago. I said, shut up. Cyrus raised his rifle, pointing it directly at her chest. Lucas started to move, but Cataryi held up her hand, stopping him. She kept her eyes locked on Cyrus. Go ahead, shoot me. Prove that you're exactly the man who pulled the trigger without thinking. Prove that nothing has changed, that you learned. Nothing, Cataryi. Lucas's voice was tight with fear. No, she didn't look away from Cyrus. He needs to make a choice right now. Be the man who killed an innocent girl because he was too scared to think. Or be the man who lowers his weapon and walks away. Be the man who breaks the cycle instead of feeding it. The silence. Stretched. Cyrus's hand shook slightly on the rifle. His men emerged from the caves, shaking their heads. Empty. The children really were gone. You can't bring your honor back by taking ours, Cataryi said softly. You can't undo what happened, but you can choose what happens next. Slowly, painfully, Cyrus lowered the rifle. His face was twisted with anguish. It should have been different. Yes, Lucas said quietly. It should have, but this is what we have. This moment, this choice. Cyrus looked at them both, and something in him seemed to break and rebuild at the same time. If I see you again, you won't. Lucas interrupted. I'm leaving this territory, taking those children north where they'll be safe. You'll never see me again. You can spend the rest of your life hating me, or you can spend it building something better. Your choice. Cyrus stared at him for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away, his men following. They watched until the three figures disappeared over the ridge. Cataryi exhaled slowly. That was stupid. That was necessary. Lucas corrected. He needed to choose. We all did. They walked down the mountain together, side by side. When they reached the trading post that evening, they found the children safe inside. Sarah Blackwood already organizing food and blankets. Nia's fever had broken. She was asking for Cataryi. Sarah, a weathered woman in her 50s with kind eyes, looked at Lucas. You, Brennan? Yes, ma'am. Heard about you. Heard you lost your daughter. She paused. These children need someone to watch over them until spring. Someone to teach them, keep them safe, help them heal. You interested in the job? Lucas looked at Cataryi, who was kneeling with the children, letting them crowd around her. She glanced up and met his eyes for the first time since he'd seen her on that platform. She smiled. Not a big smile, but real. I think we both are, he said. Sarah nodded. Good. Pay is terrible. Work is hard, but the company's honest. Over the following months, Lucas and Carrie built something neither of them had expected. Not a romance, not ownership, but partnership. They taught the children to read and write, taught them to survive in a world that hadn't been kind to them. When spring came, Lucas used his savings to buy a small piece of land near the Canadian border, far from soldiers, far from men like Cyrus. One morning, Cataryi stood on the porch of the new house they'd built, watching the children play in meadow. Lucas joined her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He handed her one. You know, she said, when you paid those $3, I meant what I said. I would rather have died. I know, but you didn't buy my life that day. You gave me the chance to choose it. She looked at him. That's the difference. What changed your mind about living? She gestured toward the children. They did them. You the choice. Itself. She paused. Turns out freedom isn't dying to prove you can't be owned. It's living because you finally can. Lucas smiled. My daughter would have liked you. I would have liked her, too. They stood together in the morning sun. 2 people who'd been broken by violence and put themselves back together with purpose. The $3 had been a transaction, but everything that came after was a choice, and that made all the difference. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another powerful tale from the frontier, where courage and redemption meet in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe and consider leaving a super chat to help us bring you more stories like this one. Your support means